Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is David, this is DH Trainz. Today we're working on the North Texas Beltline, which is a model railroad focused mostly on operations. Our first train out today is train number 7, the Emory Turn. If you look down on the bottom right, you'll see our work for today. It includes 9 pickups. We're making our first pickup now at Harbor's Cast Concrete, but according to our manifest, we have 8 other pickups at 5 industries. Each operating day, the Emory train is the first train out. We start in Emory with our pickups at our 5 industries, and then we head east to Mineola where we work the yard and then the industries in the yard, as well as wait for the interchange with the Union Pacific each day. The North Texas Beltline is a fictional line serving the former active routes between McKinney and Mineola, as well as northeast to Paris, Texas, from a combination of different railroads, being the Katy, the Santa Fe, and some old short lines that were consolidated into those 2 railroads in the past. You'll notice with this clip that the operation is sped up, and I do this in order to simplify and shorten the amount of time that you have to sit here and watch. But as you can see, we're pulling around the corner here in order to switch out Utes Feed and Seed. This is an industry that intakes loaded grain hoppers and makes animal feed to supply the local livestock markets. Right now you can see we're backing up to get our pickups here. Typically the way this train works is we work the cast concrete and then the feed mill first, before we get out on the main and call the dispatcher in order to complete a runaround. We only want to make this runaround one time in order to be efficient with our switching, and this is why we switch these 2 industries first. Once we complete our runaround, we can back down the siding and then work the remaining 3 industries before we call the dispatcher to depart. Let's hop in the cab and see how that sounds. Train number 7 to dispatch.
Ahead, 7.
We are on siding in Emory requesting track and time to run around from west to east end. Over.
Affirm. Track and time at Emory for runaround. Notify when complete. Number 7.
Wilco, 7 out. Now that we have a moment, let's talk about the layout itself. We generate our manifest and switch list from JMRI, and the game that we're using is Trainz 2019. The layout itself is about 140 miles. It's not to scale, because it's a layout of course, but we do have in our layout 3 different yards. Our main yard in Kingston, a yard in Mineola, and a yard in McKinney. Both the yards in Kingston and McKinney have their own local yard crews. The Mineola yard is worked by through Trainz and the Emory Turn that we've been working today. As we take a quick look here, we're taking a nice and slow crossing here, coming through the east end of town. We're going to stop right after the crossing, let the cars back through, and then we're going to back up onto the siding like we asked the dispatcher. And then from there, we're going to go reconnect our train so we can work our last 3 industries before we head out. You can find this route on the Trainz download station, and I'll make sure to post the KUID in the description so you guys can easily find it when you look for it. It comes complete with this single player session that you're watching right now, plus a multiplayer session for you to be able to enjoy it with all of your friends. We used to have a group of people who would get online and do this together, and we even had a dispatcher who operated on site with us. Well, if you like what you've seen so far, don't forget to hit that like button, and maybe you ought to take some time to subscribe too. Hit that bell icon, make sure you subscribe to all my videos. I've got lots of good stuff coming out related to this route and all the other things I'm working on. Plus, I mean, who wouldn't want to hear this awesome radio voice? I mean, just think about it, it's probably better than looking at my radio face. As we're backing up here, you can see we're going to hit our next 3 industries here pretty soon, so let's take a minute, let's talk about those. So as we back up, we'll reconnect with our train, and we'll call the dispatch, let the dispatch know that we are off the main, so dispatch can line that up in case we have anybody that needs to come past. But once we're back here and ready to go, we have 3 more industries we need to look at. We have Wooten's Furniture, we have Halloway's Machine Shop, and then we also have Wooten's Lumber that we've got to do some pickups. Now what you'll see is today when we're going back here and picking up, you'll notice that we're picking up almost all the cars that we have in town today, and this is actually not typical. There are plenty of times when we operate that we do have some cars that are left over as holds, either for loading or unloading, but last time this train came through, there wasn't a lot of cars that came in, and so everything was unloaded in pretty short order, so we're cleaning house today. But I don't want you to think that this is our typical operation. If you look right now, you see we're coming back into Wooten's Lumber. We've got 2 center beams to pick up, both loaded. As we grab those and pull them out, we're going to go ahead and reset and then head back to our train. A couple up so we can go work our last 2 places. If you feel this has been a pretty busy session so far, this is actually one town out of about 11. There's a lot to do on this layout, 18 separate trains to run, lots of cars. There's probably almost 600 cars on the layout, a bunch of locomotives to choose from. So if this is interesting to you, you definitely ought to go to the download station and go get this, especially since it's free. As you see here, we're backing up, fixing to make our good couple, and next up for us to work is Wooten's Furniture. It looks like we got, I think, one pickup there. Could be wrong. Oh, nope. That's two pickups. It happens. We're going to take both these box cars from Wooten's Furniture. These are most likely empty cars. Wooten's does get loaded and empty box cars brought in, depending on what they need, but those are most likely empty ones. And then we're also going to go over here to Halloway's machine shop and grab this one box car before we head out. After this last pickup, we'll go over to the west end of the siding and stop short just before the main, and then we'll call the dispatch to try to get our clearance in order to be able to head out to Mineola. Once we're in Mineola, we're going to have quite a bit of work we need to do. Some industries need to be switched and tracks need to be worked. But once we get there, we'll see what traffic looks like. We'll make sure we listen to the dispatcher. Typically, when we run this job, the dispatcher has a lot of trains he tries to get by us once we get into Mineola and we're clear of the main. So stay tuned, let's see what happens. Train 7 to dispatch.
Go ahead, 7.
7 is in the hole at Emory. Work is complete. Requesting clearance to Mineola Yard.
Roger that, 7. The road is yours. You're clear to Mineola on signal indication. Out.
Thank you. 7 out. Before we head out, we take one last look at our paperwork. We have quite a bit of work we're going to be doing in Mineola, and so it's important that we understand what cars we have in our train, as well as what tracks we're going to be putting them on once we get there. I'll talk more about Mineola Yard later, but there are quite a few things that go on there. It's a pretty busy yard, especially considering that it doesn't have a local yard crew. And on some days running this train, there's quite a bit of work that we'll have to do in the yard once we actually arrive. Once a dispatch throws a switch for us, we are all good to go. While all the places on the layout are real, they're no longer served by rail. Some places on the layout do actually have rail service, but none of them, of course, are served by this route since this route is fictional. But this particular line, running from Greenville down to Mineola, was formerly a Katy line, but it was abandoned after the war in the late 1940s. Although this run from Emory to Mineola on the layout is just a few feet, in real life, if you were to go to Google Maps or Apple Maps, whichever map you wanted to use to try to measure the distance, you would see that the distance from Emory to Mineola is probably around 30 plus miles or so. Could be off a few miles, but it's definitely not necessarily a short haul. However, since we have a lot of work that gets done here, plus this is our daily train that works the yard in Mineola, it is important that we do make that short run every day to Mineola and then, of course, back to Emory. Later on in another video, we'll show you the work at Mineola as well as the work on the return trip to Emory. I apologize for the slight camera adjustment, but as you can see, we're rounding the corner here to come into Alba. Now, the only thing that goes on in Alba is we have a siding, and this is the last place that a dispatcher can hold a train before sending it on east into Mineola. Briefly there for a second, you were able to see the speedometer that I have up, and you can see that we're running at about 12 miles an hour. Our maximum prototypical speed on this layout is about 15 miles an hour, and that's, of course, adjusting for scale speeds, because in scale, that's probably 40 to 50 miles an hour, depending on if I actually did the calculations or not. You also briefly were just able to see us pass one of only 2 intermediate signals we have on the entire route. And that's just because, of course, being a layout, there's not a lot of space between towns, and so mostly we just have home signals at the approaches to sidings. And since I brought signals up, I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about how we do signaling on the NTB. So we have what's called an APB system, or an absolute permissive block. And if you know a little bit about railroad signaling, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those of you guys who have never heard of an APB system, here's the general idea. With an APB system, it's basically just an automatic block system where the only authority you have to enter a track is given by a dispatcher. And there are no signal indications that allow you to enter a track unless the dispatcher has also cleared you to do so. For operating purposes, we use what's called direct traffic control, or DTC, which is not necessarily a railroad prototype. However, it works for the model that we have here. And in this case, all sidings on the NTB are what's called dark territory, meaning that they don't have signals. So the dispatcher is not going to be able to see them on his panel. And when you approach the siding, the signals are going to show restricting in order to limit you to 15 miles an hour because you don't technically know what's going to be in that siding, nor does your dispatcher. I personally like the APB system on single track routes as it leaves a lot more autonomy on the route itself, plus it allows for some interesting meets and such when the dispatcher has to give you orders on when you're going to take sidings. If you're looking right now, you can see that we're entering Mineola Yard, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about this yard. This is our eastern terminus, so this is as far east as we go on our railroad, and there's a lot that goes on here. There are 4 tracks in the Mineola Yard, plus a siding, and the siding is mostly just used for building outbound trains. But we only have a couple of trains that work in this yard. This yard is built mostly for servicing the daily Union Pacific interchange train that comes in. And each day that UP comes in, it's going to drop off its entire cut, usually around 20 cars, and then it's going to pick up a whole nother cut that we usually have waiting for it at the end of the day in the morning, and then it heads right back out. We also serve in this yard all the cars that are bound to Emory, which is a train that we're running right now. We're just coming in, so when we go to pick those up later, you'll see those. And then also, we have a few industries here in town that we have to serve as well. There is one other train that originates here and runs all the way westbound across the route to McKinney, and so we have to hold cars for that train as well. And that's how we use our 4 tracks. On a busy day like today, when we show up, if we don't beat the Union Pacific train, this yard gets very busy very quickly. And as you can see, we're pulling in here slowly on the main. We're going to come to a stop. Dispatchers let us know that we're actually going to have to wait today for the UP train. Typically, the UP train is already here in the yard and has already completed most of their work before we even get to this point. But since he hasn't arrived yet, this is going to make for a very, very busy yard. Now, I hope that you have found what you like today, and I hope this video has been enjoyable. If it has, please make sure to hit the like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're going to see in part 2 the UP train come in and the work getting done in the yard, and I hope that you guys will tune in for that. Thanks for tuning in today and for watching, and we'll see you later.